Our school board meetings have police officers at the meetings.
One of the keys is these school boards, right? The school boards are the key that picks the lock.
We see the Republican Party who has decided one of their goals is to bring God into schools. And that is the plan long term, is to bring God also into the government.
Contemporary version of eviscerating public schools nowadays is done on the boundaries of trans kids and gay kids.
What's different now is that the country is no longer majority white and Christian.
Hi, my name is AOK. This is Terminally Online, where I decided that I spend so much time on the internet that I might as well make it my job. Today we're talking about the role religion plays in politics. And it all starts with the debate about what is being taught in schools. Now, in the United States, there's an ongoing ideological conflict within public education, primarily driven by the religious right and conservative Christian parents. Despite the dispute, centers on curriculum content including books, sex education, and discussions about homosexuality. The religious right advocates for a curriculum focused solely on basic skills and factual knowledge, opposing materials aimed at self-esteem or behavioral change. Local schools have become key battlegrounds, with national organizations playing a significant role. Changes in family structure have led to schools taking on roles traditionally handled by families. The religious right strategy involves influencing school board elections, with claims of numerous successful takeovers.
When we first got here, everything was mild. School board meetings were boring. And then everything ramped up to this, and this is where we are now, and it's a fight, right? Our school board meetings have police officers at the meetings to escort people out who get too out of control.
One of the keys is these school boards, right? The school boards are the key that picks the lock. Talk to us about what you did in Tarrant County.
As a mother and of school-age kids, it's really quite concerning. We have never, in a time in these cities that we were dealing with, had Christianity so attacked.
Attacked? What do you mean?
Oh, look at some of the public comments in school boards and people calling Christianity a terrible, racist, bigoted thing. And the reason we started with school boards is because that is the level of government that is most impacting the future of our country. What we were seeing is the leftist indoctrination instead of education.
We see the Republican Party who has decided one of their goals is to bring God into schools. And that is the plan long term, is to bring God also into the government. So to me, it's anti-American to try and bring Christian ideology into our schools or into our government. Our country is based on allowing people to make that choice for themselves.
Contemporary version of eviscerating public schools and what remains of like some level of labor power in the form of teachers unions nowadays is done on the boundaries of trans kids and gay kids, okay?
Now, I think most of us have heard of these conversations. I think even a lot of us who aren't in the US have seen these conversations take place, and a lot of the school board complaints are mostly about LGBT issues, like should kids be taught whether or not should be made aware of homosexuality. Now, although I'm sure a lot of people feel like it's less a discussion of homosexuality and more so the promotion or indoctrination of it. And I feel like there are two sides to the conversation, especially from a teacher's perspective. Like, if the only reason you have an issue with it being directly taught is if you think it's inherently negative. Now, obviously, there are a lot of people that don't think it's negative and are very pro-LGBT, but just think that the children are a bit young. So, I mean, that's another conversation that is a bit strong, but the word indoctrination usually implies something bad. Like, you can't be indoctrinated to not steal. You can't be indoctrinated to not lie. So the word indoctrination necessarily implies that you think it's a negative thing. So, but why are these things becoming more and more of a contentious issue when in the past religion and religious beliefs were kind of the default, and that is declining demographics. So in England and Wales, census data from 2021 reveals that for the first time, less than half of the population identifies as Christian. The portion of individuals declaring no religion has seen a significant increase. The shift is notable in a country where the Church of England enjoys a substantial influence and privilege. The decline in Christian identification is partly attributed to an aging population, as well as a trend of not passing down religious beliefs to younger generations. Some argue that no religion category might have been even higher with a differently phrased question. National Secular Society and Humanists UK assert that these figures demonstrate a disconnect between the state's religious framework and the actual demographic of England and Wales.
What's different now is that the country is no longer majority white and Christian. As recently as 2008, when Barack Obama was first running for president, our first African-American president, the country was actually 54% white and Christian, so comfortably majority white and Christian. That number today is 44%. And I think that threat, right, of white Christians no longer knowing they're in control, demographically, culturally, politically, is why we're seeing it kind of come to the fore in the current context.
Look, some of this is reactionary, Leanne. I want to put up this statistic. Are you a member of a church, synagogue, or mosque? Membership over the decades. So in 1940, 73% of Americans were a member of a church, synagogue, or a mosque. Look where we are in 2020. We're down to 47%. So
I think for conservative Christians, there has been a dawning awareness of the fact that whereas the society basically agreed with us on almost every important issue, I mean, the overlap, if you take a Venn diagram, was so overwhelming that outsiders would call the United States a Christian nation. So something's clearly changed, and conservative Christians in this country are now in a paradox or a predicament.
So, I think most of us have noticed. I think even in countries that are still majorly conservative, like Nigeria or more African countries where Christianity is more prevalent, I think most of us have noticed the decline in Christianity. And now, two different people can look at it two different ways, and it could be, as people get more educated, they're less likely to require the need for religion, and maybe religion isn't as sophisticated enough for a more educated world. But people might look at it as, well, because non-religious dogma is being fed into schools, then people are less likely to go towards religion. Whichever camp you fall in, I think both explanations work well. It just depends on how you view education. Is education a positive thing, actually helping people to see things more factually, or is education more of a negative thing that is allowing people to stray away from more fundamental values? If the Christian population of these countries is going down, then that makes Christians start to become defensive. And that brings me to the next part, which is the Christian persecution. There is a need for accurate discernment between real and imagined oppression. While Christians globally face severe discrimination, in the West, tensions arise from clashes with public policy and cultural norms. Some of the exaggerated sense of persecution can be attributed to cultural influences, such as the Jesus freak movement and the popularity of books like Left Behind. There is a fetishization of suffering in Christian narratives, and select cases of alleged persecution are highly considered by conservative pundits and organizations. We shouldn't interpret personal experiences or news events as signs of oppression, as this can lead to a victimhood mentality. Focus on genuine cases of persecution rather than becoming embroiled in imagined or exaggerated offenses. It all comes down to what sounds the most dramatic when you preach it on the altar. And if you want to alter how this video performs in the algorithm, you should drop a like on this video. Now, let's get back to the main story. Doesn't the law protect the rights of people who are genuinely being persecuted? And that brings us to the next part, separation of church and state. According to Frank Ravitch, professor of law at Michigan State University, Separation of church and state refers to the attempt to keep government from influencing religion and religion from both influencing government to the greatest extent possible. Given the complexities of both, there are two historical views of separation. One is the Jeffersonian view, which is that separation protects government from undue influence by religion. The other view is that a lot of people associate with Roger Williams, which is that separation protects religion from the government. In addition to these historical views, there is another view of separation. It's the idea of separation being a mechanism for protecting religious pluralism. There are many religions across the world and many separate sects with these religions. Separation helps to prevent the government from promoting one religion or sect over the others. That really helps protect religious pluralism so that the government can't impose one religion on everybody.
In 1947, the Supreme Court solidified into law the idea of the separation between church and state. The separation of church and state, contrary to popular belief, appears nowhere in the Constitution. The First Amendment guarantees the free exercise of religion, but it does not explicitly say there must be a separation of church and state. This idea comes from Thomas Jefferson, who interpreted the free exercise clause to guarantee a wall of separation between church and state. The fact that Jefferson, one of the framers of the Constitution, wrote these words is strong evidence that the intent of the Constitution was to create separation between church and state, but it's not explicitly written into the Constitution and is therefore a bit more tenuous than I think the average American thinks.
The LGBTQ and the left is saying, oh, you're a church, separation of church and state. Get in the stands. You can't fight the fight. You can't play in the game. Church, preachers, you stand up in the stands, separation of...
We need to be the party of nationalism, and I'm a Christian and I say it proudly. We should be Christian nationalists.
The church is supposed to direct government, not the opposite way. The church is supposed to influence government, and we need to be so involved in what is going on in our government.
In 1947, in Everson v. Board of Education, Justice Hugo Black wrote, "The establishment of religion clause in the First Amendment means at least this: neither a state nor the federal government may set up a church. Neither can pass laws that aid one religion, aid all religions, or prefer one religion over another. Neither can force a person to go or to remain away from church against his will, or force him to profess a belief or disbelief in any religion." In the words of Jefferson, the clause against establishment of religion by law was intended to erect a wall of separation between church and state.
Now, how I feel about persecution and religion generally is, or like the separation of church and state generally is, I think most people don't understand how it's not fundamentally written into like the US Constitution. And I think it doesn't just affect the United States, where the issue is more contentious, where I think the United States is one of the countries that is most passionate about its connection with the Constitution. I think other countries pass policies a little bit more flexibly, so the interpretation of the Constitution isn't as strong. So I think in the issue is more of a global issue, but I think it all comes down to why you think religion should influence the decisions of the state. The strongest argument is that law is all about policing morality. So if you feel something is moral or immoral, then there's no reason why you shouldn't think it should be passed into legislature. So now obviously what a Christian thinks is moral or immoral is dictated by his religion. So he's going to vote into legislation what he thinks is moral based on that. So I think where you have to draw the line is, does your view of morality only apply to religion? And if it only applies to religion, then it shouldn't affect other people. It should only affect how you behave. If your only citation for why this is immoral is I got it from my religion, then you should allow other people to practice their own beliefs and their own religion. But if it's something that you feel is immoral based on your religion, but also based on other harmful effects, like maybe alcoholism, then I think maybe you might also be a little bit more, then I might be a little bit more sympathetic with you passing laws, because alcohol has negative effects. It's not only wrong according to the Quran, or even a lot of Christians feel it's wrong, but there are also negative effects in society. So if you want to pass laws based on its morality and also based on its negative effects, then that makes more sense. But if it's purely religious, then it doesn't make sense for other people to help you practice your religion, if that makes sense. Okay, but what about religion in non-Western countries or non-Christian countries? And that brings us to a more contentious or a more complicated form of religion and politics, and that is Sharia law. Now, Sharia is Islam's legal system, derived from the Quran, Sunnah, and Hadith. It serves as a comprehensive guide for Muslims, covering various aspects of life, including prayer, fasting, and charity. Sharia can be consulted on everyday matters from social situations to family law, finance, and business. There are 5 schools of Islamic law, each with distinct interpretations. Sharia addresses both ethical conduct and worship, with a portion focused on crime. Offenses are divided into had, serious crimes with set penalties, and tazir. Forgive me for any of these pronunciations. And tazir is punishment at the judge's discretion. For instance, theft, which under the strictest interpretations of Sharia can be punishable by amputating. Countries applying Islamic law may differ in their enforcement of these penalties, reflecting diverse Muslim attitudes towards harsh punishment.
فإحنا من أسباب إقامة الخلافة على منهج النبوة، وأهم شرط لإقامة الخلافة على منهج النبوة هو الأمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر. بالنسبة للخمور، أنا أتحداك تجيب واحد مخمور، تلقى واحد مخمور. ما في، أتحداك تجيب واحد يبيع خمر. ولو في بيته أصبحوا يخافوا، لأن تأتي البلاغات. ولا زلنا نجاهد الكفار ببنادقنا وبأسلحتنا، ولكن لابد أن نواجه هذا الأمر بالمنكرات.
So, an interesting thing about Sharia law is there are a lot of fundamentalist Christians who are scared of Sharia law but don't realize how they interpret the Bible in a way that pushes kind of like a religious, kind of like pushes a Christian form of Sharia law. And I think when you hear Sharia, especially in Nigeria, negative connotations come to mind. Like I remember when Buhari was going to be elected, that a lot of people were scared that he could enact Sharia law. Aside from the fact that the president doesn't have that much control over legislation, it just shows you that people think Sharia law is hardcore, Sharia law is violent, but somehow the Christian law doesn't follow those same rules. Now, obviously, I'm not defending one type of religion over another. I'm just pointing out like how people perceive these two doctrines very differently. And even like going further, like you notice a difference between how left-wingers view Christianity and how they view Islam, how they're very defensive and protective of Islam, but they see Christianity as an attack. Why? I don't know, maybe because Christianity is run by or is mostly practiced by white people, and people who practice Islam are also ethnic minorities, so they're going to be more sympathetic with the ethnic minority. But if you feel like one religion is harmful, then they should both be harmful. I don't think it makes sense to make judgments based on that. You see it in the way, even the other way around, right? Like the right is very defensive of Christianity, but they're always quick to paint Islam in a more negative, in a more violent light. So yeah, I don't know how to wrap this part up, but I think we should all be like more consistent in how we treat religions and be more empathetic of other people's religions. both as a religious person and both as a non-religious person. As a religious person, you should respect other people's rights to practice their own secular life, and as a non-religious person, you should help people. You should protect people's rights to live their own beliefs and live their own values. So thank you. If you like the video, and don't forget to subscribe.
Ideological purity compromises weakness, a fundamentalist belief in scriptural literalism. Denying science, unmoved by facts, undeterred by new information, a hostile fear of progress, a demonization of education, a need to control women's bodies, severe xenophobia, tribal mentality, intolerance of dissent, and a pathological hatred of the U.S. government. They can call themselves the Tea Party, they can call themselves conservatives, and they can even call themselves Republicans, though Republicans certainly shouldn't. But we should call them what they are, the American Taliban.